name is Angelo Lopez. I'm a Filipino American artist and cartoonist based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And right now, I'm in a group art exhibition at Chopsticks Alley Art Gallery in downtown San Jose, California. And right now, I'm going to be speaking with another artist who's also in that group art exhibition, Vi Son Trinh. Hi, V. And
Hi.
hi. And let me tell you a little bit about him. V is a Vietnamese American visual storyteller based in the San Francisco Bay Area. He was born in a refugee camp in Galang, Indonesia, and his work explores the personal narratives of fellow refugees and immigrant community members. His work has been featured in Banana Magazine, the San Francisco Chronicle, Hyphen Magazine, the Asian American Donor Program, and VSCO. What does that stand for?
It stands for, so they call it VSCO, but the long name is a Visual Supply Company, and like a group of photographer visual collectives who create this app to use. It's like kind of like it's more than a filter. It's now becoming more of an app where people can upload their work. So it's like an alternative Instagram, but in my opinion, it's more sophisticated, and they're
Oh,
based in Oakland too, so they don't have all the advertisement like Instagram these days and other social
oh,
media. But yeah,
I didn't know that. Artists and cartoonists have been bugging me to go on Instagram for years, so I finally joined. But now I find out there's a better one.
yeah.
You don't like Instagram, or?
I mean, I still use it occasionally, but I haven't. So I think ever since Instagram took a different turn, I end up pulling a lot of my images away. I just started deleting it, and I really want to focus more on my website because at least I have more autonomy over that. Whereas I think with Instagram, I have it just to maybe post a story here and there, but I haven't really uploaded anything recently there. Just the fear of like not knowing how my work will get altered, and I guess the whole AI conflict recently where AI art is being pulling out different artists and
Oh,
creating this like hodgepodge of work that doesn't seem to have a voice anymore.
yeah.
So I've been kind of very, very careful about that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe we can talk about it because I don't really know the issue very well and stuff.
Okay.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, I guess we can start out just by asking, tell me about the work that you have right now in our current group art exhibition.
Yeah. So I created this 3-minute video call in Vietnamese. It's called Gia đình là mãi mãi, which means family is forever.
Mhm.
And it was a work that I created last year. But the way how it started was so I remember I was just going through. I went back and visited my parents. I think a couple of years ago up in East Bay in Concord, and I found a shoebox full of different high 8 cassettes, kind of
Oh,
like the cassettes that like it's like the dad cam, right?
yeah.
So I found a bunch of those, and I was like, oh my gosh, like has anyone ever have you ever archived these, right? Because one of the fears of like any analog is that it's going to perish over time, right? So I wanted to digitize those, and I started digitizing one by one by one. And the more that I kind of delved into it, I found more interesting hidden gems of memories of my father returning back to Vietnam in the early 90s. So
Wow.
that was the first time that he went back to Vietnam after the family escaped the war.
Yeah.
So yeah, we came to the States in 1987. I was 1 years old at the time when I came to the States, and then I think 4 or 5 years later, my dad was able to save enough money to buy a flight ticket back to see his parents in Vietnam, and he also carried a dad cam with him at the time too. Now, not those typical ones, like the really big ones.
Oh,
Yeah. So he carried that, and he filmed all these different villages that he went to, and these were places that he grew up. And as I was gathering more of those, I start to create like my whole archive. I started like, oh, this is dad in this village, and this year, and this year, and this year. And then I also found some more footage of me growing up in East Los Angeles as a kid. So there's some like family events. There's videos of me getting ready for school. birthday parties, things of that. And then I wanted to use that same technology more recently last year and film something of myself now, living in the Bay Area. So I had all these different videos and I was like thinking, well, what can I do with that? And I remember I had a dream, like I went to sleep and I had this like really a reassuring dream. It's a dream where I had pictured 3 generations of my family. We all got together again,
Yeah.
and we had dinner for the one last time. And it's just something about that, just the idea of like beyond borders, beyond time, just memories sort of mended into one.
Yeah.
And then another thing that got me wanting to make this video was I remember reading a book by Thich Nhat Hanh. It was his last book. He's the Vietnamese Buddhist monk who worked along with Martin Luther King during the Civil Rights Movement.
Yeah.
But in the book on, I believe it's called How to Save Our Planet. And one of the quotes that he said, and I wrote it down here, he says, "If you look deeply into the palms of your hand, you will see your parents and all generations of your ancestors, all of them alive in this moment, each present in your body. You and the continuation of each other are these people."
Yeah.
So I had that quote in my mind, and I was like, maybe I'll take what I found and I'll curate all these clips together to kind of create this narrative that, yes, even though these footage are filmed in different time frames, different eras, and different generations, but we're still kind of doing like the same thing. So I've been really interested of just finding value in the ordinary things of life. And so if you watch the video, if anybody watches the video, it's not like an exciting video. There's like no dramatic tensions or anything, but it's like
nobody gets murdered or anything.
Nobody gets murdered, you know. But it's just like day-to-day things, you know, like making food, picking a fruit from a tree, things of that sort. You know, traveling here and there, like we all do that. So something about that I really value, and I wanted to put it together. And there's a song aspect to it too. So it's visuals that's overlaid with this one particular song, and this song is originally written by a very famous Vietnamese singer during the Vietnam War. Her name is Khanh Le. But the song itself that's used for this video is covered by a more recent singer on YouTube. So I think it's something about the young and the new is paying homage to the older generations. Kind of reflects that theme. So I created this video, and I think it's on loop at Chopstick Alley even as we speak, 24/7. So it kind of sets a vibe for all the other artists too as well, which is cool.
Yeah. So family and time and the interaction of generations is important for you at this time in your life, right?
Yes.
Yeah. My mom just passed away 2 years ago, and so family has become a lot more important to me. So I really admire. I see a great value in you preserving, because you know, if you don't preserve it, it'll be lost and stuff, and it'll be a loss for future generations and stuff. So that's cool. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. So I'm curious. I said a little bit about your background, but could you tell me a little bit more about your background? How did you become interested in photography?
Yeah, it's funny because I don't have any formal training in photography. Actually, I was so when I went to Davis. So I went to Davis. I was an English major actually, and but I've always sort of grew up in an environment where art was kind of like a gray area. It was like it's either encouraged or it's not. You know, my parents like, oh, you know, like become a physician or go become an engineer, things of that sort. But then I see my dad carrying his camera and he paints too. So I was having these very conflicted feelings. So to me, like creativity was never perceived as a full-time thing that I couldn't get income out of or support myself, but it's always been seen as a kind of a pastime. But I grew up, you know, watching my dad really into painting, And it actually started, and I mean, I wish I were able to find this picture, but when my dad was at the refugee camp, um, he's a painter, so he paints, and he had an art exhibit at the refugee camp that we stayed at in Indonesia, Galang. And this was
Oh,
back in like mid 80s, 80, 87 or 86, I can't remember. And then when we moved back to the States, he would have all these different paintings that he immigrated to the States with. So we have all these different paintings lying around. And so as a kid, like, I was very fascinated by some of the visuals and the vibrant colors that he uses on his canvas.
wow.
And then
Sounds like a great experience.
yeah, and then even just watching my dad, being the person with a dad cam, for me, yeah, it's just I remember like my first initial reaction. I thought this is like a really cool magical box that's able to pull memories from the physical world and digitize it. As
Yeah.
as a as a 4-year-old, that made no sense to me, and I thought that was like, what is this weird wizardry? Um, so yeah, so then and ever since then, that's just been a huge mark in my mind. And then it was not until at Davis where I started to create my own thing, and I saved some money. I saved a lot of lunch money buying my first video camcorder,
Oh,
digitized camcorder, and I was one of those kids at college where I would skip class to film something that's happening on campus.
oh, cool.
Uh, yeah, so my grades weren't stellar, but I was really curious about life happening outside of the four walls of our classroom.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so I filmed things like a lot of protests, like the Occupy Davis movement at the time. Uh,
Oh,
I was really deeply involved in working with people who were living with leukemia,
wow.
um, things of that sort, things that I find value. Whether it's related to healthcare, whether it's related to human rights, whether it's related to just how to be a better person, how to be
Yeah.
fundamentally a better human being, and trying to create artwork that has some type of impact on somebody.
Oh,
And so that's been sort of my training. That's been sort of my background is a lot of self-taught and curiosity. um, I may have taken like one documentary production class, but other than that, I didn't get a degree for it. Everything has just been sort of self-driven
oh, okay. That's cool. So there was always been a social justice element from the very beginning. Oh,
from the very beginning. Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So what made you shift from, so that's documentary filmmaking. How did you get
Mm-hmm.
into photography?
So, what's funny? So I actually went to documentary first before I went into photography. And I would have to say, um, it has partially to do with Instagram. Instagram back
Oh,
in 2014, before it became the Instagram today. But Instagram 2014 made me set aside my camcorder and
yeah.
focus predominantly on photography.
Oh,
And I think one of the one of the reasons why I spend more time in photography was I said, my first level would be filmmaking, but in order for me to be a better filmmaker, I need to learn like composition. I need to learn the basic
yeah.
elements of how to take a picture and colors and things of that sort. So I needed to focus on still photos.
Yeah.
Um, so what better yet than buying a film camera, 35 millimeter. I got a Pentax K1000, which is somewhere over here,
Yeah.
but it's like your universal student film camera. And I needed to learn how light works and f-stop and aperture and all those different jazz and the Sunny 16 rule and basically all your photography like textbook um, concepts. So when Instagram came around, uh, it was sort of it got me excited because I was seeing other people within the community doing photography too, and we were able to kind of feed off of each other. We would have these Insta meets where we would pick out a certain venue out in the Bay Area that had a really cool backdrop, whether it's up in Mount Tam with the fogs rolling through August, or whether it's somewhere much more day-to-day living, like going to Chinatown in San Francisco, doing street photography. So those were my people, and that really got the cog going, the wheel in my brain. It's like, oh, let's just keep on making and producing and critiquing each other. So that was Instagram for me back in 2014 up until maybe 2018 or 19 or so, where Instagram starts to kind of take on more of a different avenue, more algorithm, so to speak.
Okay.
Yeah, so I wasn't able to keep up with the times with this technology. It was just going so fast.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
But
then
it was helpful for you
photography.
to be in the community, right? The community helped spur you.
It was predominantly the community, yes. So I think I mean, there's always that question is like, would you create knowing if no one's going to see your work? And that's always been a hard. I can't really answer that because so much the work like I'm pretty needy in terms of like I need an audience, right? Like I need to I need to be seen. I need to be
You and every
valued.
other artist.
Yeah, like I'm sensitive about my work, but I also value critique and positive reinforcement of affirmation too as well. But like, can I create if there's no audience? And the answer is I'm not sure. You know, can I create without a community? It's like no, because we feed off of each other. I'm
Yeah.
inspired by other people's stories, and if I become a hermit, like what I'm sure I can find inspirations out of nowhere because as artists, we're really good at creating something out of nothing.
Yeah.
But there's also this other element that you're missing out on is the community feedback. So yeah.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, yeah. I didn't think about that, but I think you're right and stuff. You know, I think you're right. Like I know when I do my art, it's the same thing. I'm kind of needy for, please give me validation.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, But okay. Well, who became your photographer? Who are your photography heroes then?
Ooh,
And
photography.
how did they influence you?
That is a good question. I've been really into Japanese photographers.
Oh,
So there was like different stages in my photography journey where I was like very fixated on this particular style, and I was very fixated on this particular style. I think one was Robert Frank.
oh,
Uh,
the
yeah,
Americans, right?
the Americans exactly, but he wasn't American himself. I think he was European. Can't
Yeah,
remember
that's why it's such an ironic book.
yeah, it's like in every coffee table, but like that to me, the idea of like I think I romanticize the idea of like, oh, I just wish I have like a road, like a car, like a Volkswagen or something, just go out and take pictures and you
Oh,
know immerse myself in different people's lives. So him for sure was kind of got me into like street photography.
oh yeah.
And then in terms of Japanese photography, it's like I was really into Daido Moriyama. He
Oh,
was a photographer who really kind of shines during the 70s to 80s. And a lot of his photos is kind of weird in the sense that they're not really good. Well, not good because it's pretty subjective, but he works a lot with the angles, right? It's not
oh,
like it's not very clinical. It's not, you know, uh, you look at it, it makes you have a headache looking at his photos because he's turning this way, he's turning the camera this
oh.
way, and I think a lot of it has to do with the way he takes the photos because he's always on the prowl, like he's walking, he sees something, he takes it,
So
and
he's a
it's
street
almost
photographer, right?
he's a street photographer, but I almost want to say he's kind of like a voyeuristic photographer in the sense that he he uh, he just tries to portray Tokyo in a very like when you look at his photos, they're black and white, they're very gritty, and there's some sense of desolations in the photo itself.
Oh,
Um, so I think he portrays that through his composition and through the subject matter that he chooses. A lot of people that he take pictures of are like salarymen, right? Like business workers in Tokyo. There's this one iconic photo he took was this feral dog that turned and looked back into the camera. And maybe I can try to find and send to you.
yeah,
That
yeah.
photo itself was this like guidance animal. It essentially he resonates with this particular dog because this dog is him in the sense that this dog is hungry. He's on the prowl. He's always out there looking for some type of subject to take photos of. Um, and he just looks very disheveled. Like Daido Moriyama is a very disheveled photographer.
Yeah.
So sometimes I identify with that too. When I was like taking pictures in Chinatown, like one of the things that I try to tell myself is like, okay, let's have a plan. what am I taking photos of? So that it's much more efficient in terms of my time. But there's also days where I just turn off that part of my brain and I just go out, carry a camera, and I would just look at something that catches my eyes, and that'll be the first thing I take a photo. And then I'll have a bunch of different photos. I'll come home, I'll look at it, and then I'll try to create a narrative out of it.
Yeah,
So Dado Moriyama is one of them. But also not photography too. There's also filmmakers that I really, really love that has like photography aspects of it too. And again, Japanese photographer or videographers, one being Hirokazu Kurita. Do you know the movie like either Afterlife or Shoplifter?
I know Shoplifter.
Okay, so Shoplifter.
I don't know Afterlife. Yeah.
So Afterlife is one of his more previous movies. I think it was made during the 90s or 80s. Yeah. And then Shoplifters is a more recent one.
And that one has a sort of social commentary aspect too, with the poor and stuff.
Yeah, different social cast. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Hirokazu Kurita. I also like some of like more Japanese horror films. But without the jump scare, it's more of the tension building and more of the aesthetic of it. Him being Kiyoshi Kurosawa. He did the movie called The Cure.
No, I don't know that. Yeah.
It's so good. It's I highly recommend it. And then more recently, Kogonada. He's a Japanese American, I believe, or Korean American. I can't remember. But he did this movie called After Yang.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you find a lot of those filmmakers were former photographers who went to film to, their aesthetic as a photographer transfers into their film, I guess.
That's a good question. Like, are you saying, do I know anybody who...
Or actually, or do the filmmakers that you like? I'm just curious. I don't know those filmmakers very well, but I'm curious because, who's the guy who did The Shining? Stanley Kubrick. He was a photographer. And then he became a filmmaker and stuff. And you know what you were saying, how he used his film as his photography aesthetic into his film and stuff. I'm just wondering, this is more of a question of ignorance because I don't know those filmmakers very well. But
that's a good question. I actually don't know like what came first, like the chicken or the egg in terms of these directors. I've recently I watched their movies in the past, but this is long before I even fathom about creating film. So I used to work at the library, and one of the things I do in the library in high school was I would just pick out any movies that had a cool cover at the time. That's how I discovered new things. And then and I would watch it, but then I don't know the name of the director. And then fast forward to the last 5 years, I've been going to like Mountain View Public Library, and I would find these movies again, and then I watch it with more of a critical mindset. And the reason why I particularly like these films is because there are like photography aspects in each film. I mean, it's a cinema, right? Yeah. I find that a lot of their work reflects on this idea that we talked about, like valuing the ordinary of life, right? And there's actually a Japanese term of that. It's called shomengeki. It's actually, I learned about that just very recently. Shomengeki is just finding small, menial values in life without trying to build up this giant tension. And so a lot of these directors have those qualities in their filmmaking, which can also translate into photography too as well. We don't have to take pictures because something is beautiful, or like we can take a picture of something that is personal to you, that you're not expecting every audience to feel that same way, but it has a higher value. Like, don't take pictures because you think it's aesthetic or it's for a social media purpose or things of that sort, but just more of kind of like the personal growth, the journey of what exactly you're trying to find, that inner truth, essentially, to speak.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah. I never would have thought of that, but yeah. That's a great. I would never have. Well, actually, I probably should have thought as film as being an influence on photographers, because it makes sense. So, yeah, I used to work in the library too, but now I'm going to have to look at some of these filmmakers and stuff. So
yeah.
Do you know Corky Lee?
Yes, the late photographer is in New York City, right?
Yeah, yeah. Were you
Yeah.
influenced by him, or because he's more of a photojournalist, right? But um, was because he really wanted to chronicle the Asian American community. So
Mm.
was he an influence on you, or
You know what's funny? So I was actually influenced by a photographer who was influenced by Corky Lee. And
okay.
which is funny because by the time Corky Lee passed away, I just learned about Corky Lee, and I hate to admit it, but I was kind of late on learning about him.
Oh no, I
Uh,
was too. I learned about him when I read his obituary and stuff,
yes,
and then I had to backtrack and learn about him.
yeah. So my friend, his name is Anrong Shu. He is based in New York. He works for the New York Times, and a lot of his big photo project was called the New Romantic, and a lot of the people that he chooses to shoot were predominantly Asian Americans. So to me, that was sort of like he was like the Asian American Robert Frank in a way, but in the
He's not the
21st.
American, he's the Asian American.
He's the Asian Americans, exactly. So I'm still waiting for that book. But then when my friend posts something about Corky Lee, and then I delve into Corky Lee's book or photos, like wow, these are beautiful. This is something that you would see in a lot of Asian American history books.
Yeah.
These photos, right? So, so maybe he is the original Asian American Robert Frank.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
yeah. For this first session, we have 9:40 left for this. The time went quickly. So
Oh, okay.
let me ask this one question, and then I'll download the video, and then I'll let you know for the next to put on the next link and stuff. So, this is just a question of craft and stuff. You said there's a certain camera that you like. What's that camera again? And what's your photography process and stuff? You love doing street photography. I mean, do you say, hey, and when the person turns around, you take a picture of them and you run away as fast as you can, or what's your
Yeah,
process?
here and there. So for photography, I'm into film photography, so 35 millimeter, and my workhorse is a Nikon F2, which is funny because I learned that this exact type of camera was used predominantly in Vietnam War by American journalists.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
so I think there's something about like me as a Vietnamese American using this photo in America. It's like kind of taking the power back, right?
Yeah, give that back to me.
give it back. But the camera itself is beautiful. It's rugged. It can withstand any type of environment. You can drop it from like a 5-story building and it will still work. It'll last through post-apocalyptic. So it's all mechanic, right? You don't need any electric, or digital. So that's been my workhorse, and I use that camera a lot to take photos of subject matters. I also like smaller cameras too, if I'm trying to be more incognito, if I'm taking photos on the street and I don't want to get like robbed or anything, especially now in the Bay. So that's a Ricoh, Ricoh GR1. Not a film. They do have a film version, but I have a digital version, which unfortunately got stolen from me. But that was my favorite camera at the time. In terms of video, so I've been using my dad's camera, not that exact same camera.
The big giant one.
Now smaller. He moved on to a smaller film camera, camcorder that he uses. It's hard to be
incognito with that big camera.
Yeah, it's just I don't want to look like this like hipster with this giant camera. Like but I think it's a Sony brand. I don't remember the exact model. So sometimes occasionally I use that to film something around the house. And then more recently, I'm trying to save up to get a medium format camera, which is like a 35 millimeter, but just a bigger film canvas. And I'm kind of shopping around for that too. In terms of process, it kind of depends. If I'm doing street photography, and there's like a whole concept of it, and if I'm really into if I knew there's somebody out there who doesn't want to be bothered, I'm not going to go out of my way and stop and talk to them. And but I would try to be very respectful of their space. So sometimes I would walk by, take a quick photo and walk away. And sometimes I get away with that because sometimes I feel like candid photos are much better than people who are posing. Now, with that said, if there is somebody on there who I think that I can have a conversation with, technically for me that's best practice. Like I want to get to know the person, I want to know the context of who they are. So I'll talk to them and I'll find a scene around the respected environment, and I want to have them sit there and continue doing the thing, and I'll just take a candid photo with their acknowledgement too as well too. So in terms of street photography, I do that. If I'm doing photos for projects itself, then that takes like a whole team of people, maybe 2 or 3 different people, to kind of help set up a project environment, whether it's wardrobe, whether it's sets, like background sets, things of that sort. But yeah, so recently I've been trying to get back into street photography, and I'm trying to be more candid, just because I like the idea of just taking pictures quickly, going from point A to point B. It feels almost like jazz. You're just kind of going out, like it's all improvisation. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's sort of my process recently.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I'm wondering. Tanya, I talked to her. She was mentioning how, like, when she does her painting, she loves the feel of the brush against the canvas and the sort of sensualness about it. I know this is probably a weird question, but is there sort of like do you enjoy when you're doing the photography? Is there a sort of sensuality about that? Like when you're looking through the lens, do you enjoy composing the picture? Or do you enjoy the walking around and is there a sort of like with the canvas and brush and canvas, there's a sort of sensual, it involves the senses. Is there something about that with photography too that you enjoy?
Yes, there's a certain energy to it, specifically with film camera.
Okay.
It's the loading on the film, right?
Oh,
You
okay.
load the film, and then it's the pulling the lever when you're ready to take a photo. You're really proactively engaging in the photo itself, as opposed to like taking a picture on your phone, right? There's a sensuality to it. It's fun. It's very tactile. It's touch, and there's also the present with you and the subject matter too. Whether you're taking it incognito, whether you're having a conversation, it really requires you to slow down. Not only that, with film, you have very limited amount of slots per film per roll. Some are 28 shots per roll, 32, 36, depending on what film you get. But because you have those limitations, every photo that you take must count for something, right? It's not like you can go out and take pictures, because you're going to waste a lot of money. Film is so expensive these days, which is why I haven't taken a lot of film. Like a roll of film, like this one right here, can cost about $40. Not this particular roll, but $40 back then. When I take photos 5 years ago, it was $10. It's crazy. So now if I want to get back to shooting more film, like I have to be more intent and with every shot I do. But there's that sensuality to it. It's like you feel this it's like this magical box with you, and just touching it, pulling the lever back, changing the lens itself, knowing what type of tool you're going to use. It's very engaging. So I really like that part of taking photography with the film camera.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Is it did Kodak, did they went out of business? Is that why it's expensive or?
No, I think no, Kodak's still in business. Is it Fuji? I think Fuji's not going out of business, but they're stopping making particular film roll. I think the one calling the Superior, and AGFA, another company, AGFA, they just stopped making their roll, I think, a few years back. So there's a lot of these companies are either going bankrupt. But I mean, there's a resurgence of film photography, especially with newer generations of photographers who really like that aspect of photography. So I'm praying, I'm crossing my fingers that as more film is getting the limelight, that the cost will go down, and then there'll be more supply for the demands that we're having.
I'm curious. And looking at your website, you do these various photo essays where you take a series of photographs around a single theme. Do you mind if viewers just look at one photograph, or would you rather have viewers look at the photograph in the context of the entire series?
Oh, I see. I think for me, I like to, so it kind of, the ways I curate the photos, I guess it depends if it's if it's a photo series, particular a theme or project or some type of narrative that I'm trying to portray,
Yeah.
I would like the audience to be able to see each image and as a series as a whole, because
Yeah.
I believe each photo itself is sort of speaking to each other, right? It kind of piggybacks on each other. So
Yeah.
um, one particular photo project I'm thinking of right now is I did a series called At Sea and Free, and that's actually more of an archival photo project where I would find pictures of old pictures of my family dating back pre-Vietnam War, post-Vietnam War, and then newly in the States. I deliberately chronologically place it in that order so that it tells a story itself. I think so much has to do with me as wanting to be a journalist in my past life that I
Oh,
sort of treat different uh, photo content um, as a conversation with each other.
wow.
Um, yeah, and then I think there's a couple of photos on my website where some of the photos don't really speak to each other too, but they speak in each other in a sense that maybe I was going for more of an aesthetic, whether it's I really like this color tone, or maybe uh, I'm sort of playing with certain lights and shadows of these photos, but the context itself, maybe from a narrative perspective, might not be related, but I think it can be related in terms of the sort of the photo composition or colors or shadows and things of that sort, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. So the kind of the whole is better than the sum of its parts.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's cool. That's cool. So, okay. Well, I did look at your website, and it's a great website, but I noticed in your website, you've done stuff on, you've done a photo essay on the Asian American healthcare workers.
Mm,
You've done a photo essay on the Black April Memorial. Is that commemorating the fall of Saigon, I guess?
yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And you've done stuff on like exploring the Chinatown of the Los Angeles that you grew up in, right?
Hmm.
And stuff. Now, how has your Asian American identity influenced your work? And more specifically, how has your Vietnamese American identity influenced your work?
Mm. That's a good question. Hmm. I I think it has a lot of to do with self-exploration of wanting to know how my identity takes place and space in a very like white dominant culture.
Yeah.
Um, and so a lot of it has to do with finding communities that either looks like me or has a similar culture. Um, to find it's I don't know what's the term, but it's like when I don't want to be like a fly on the wall type photographer. I specifically chose Asian American because I identify as an Asian American, and I want to be more of an active participant in the photo series that I work in. I know different photographers, they prefer to be more documentary style, where they want to stay as far as they can from the subject matter that they're shooting, which
Uh, you
may
mean like
sacrifice
passive observers, I
passive
guess?
observers. Where I don't know if it's like photographers from National Geographics or things of that sort, where they don't like to put themselves too much in the scene,
Yeah.
because in hopes of not putting more of a Western view on it, or whatever. They want to try to keep it as objective as possible. I think for me, I'm kind of the little bit of the opposite, because of the subject matters I chose to shoot. I identify predominantly in that. I did photo projects, like you said, the Chinatown. I specifically chose that because at the time, Chinatown to me was a safe space. It was a community where I felt that whenever I'm moving to a different city or a different state, I seek out Chinatown because it's a place of familiarity. It's a place of proximity. It's a place that feels like home to me. I don't speak Chinese, but I speak Vietnamese, and sometimes just to hear a different language outside of English is familiarity to me. And so when I I think that's what it means to me to be as an Asian American, is to find comfort in my own culture, find that familiarity. And so I seek out people who looks like me, who share similar cultures and stories. And I wanted to take that honor of portraying their stories, because um, like for my parents, and I'm kind of delving into a different topic now, but like who my parents are the ones who sort of set, or at least in their generations, are the one who set the bare bone, the foundation, right? They were trying to fulfill the basic needs, right? Survival.
Yeah.
And then as as a second generation here, or I guess 1.5, whatever, however you want to identify, um, we have the privilege of carrying that baton of their stories. Because if no one's not going to tell their stories, who will, right?
Yeah.
Because they're so
Yeah.
busy with the fundamental things of living here in an environment that doesn't really favor, the minority in a sense. So we need to be the ones to tell that story, right?
I guess we have the opportunities that they never did. So
Exactly.
we have the time and the space to chronicle the necessary generational stories that they just don't have the time to record.
Exactly. And so I think a lot of that has to do with my fascination of taking photos of a lot of Asian Americans, or refugee immigrant communities, because I identify as those communities. And so it's my way of navigating through life. It's my way of self-exploring. What are some of the shortcomings we have, or what are some of the strengths and celebrations we have about within our community?
Yeah.
And we need more. We need more of those type of artists or creative to empower ourselves through these very powerful medium that we choose.
Yeah, yeah. With the rise in Asian American hate and stuff, you find that in the documenting the Asian American community takes an added importance.
Yes, even more so, because as the resurgence, or not, yeah, resurgence, because Asian hate violence has been ongoing ever since Asians have been here. Not even just in the States, but also in places that's been colonized by other European cultures, um, or other Asian cultures colonizing other Asian cultures, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Which I
yeah,
won't go into much into detail, but I think even more so now, we as an artist kind of have a responsibility to try to find, what does that mean for us? How do we portray ourselves as someone who, I guess, because like part of me, I now that you mention it, I haven't really had time to digest it, and maybe you and I can both digest it. But oftentimes the media now has been kind of portray Asians as being like submissive, and like we're always getting attacked, and it's almost through like a victimized lens, that there's not a lot of coverage of Asians who are actually defending themselves, right? I mean, I
yeah.
know there's a lot of groups right now. There's actually this one group that I've been following very closely, called Seniors Fight Back.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
they're based in Chinatown in San Francisco, where um, these guys, they practice Muay Thai, Thai boxing,
Oh,
and they're actually kind of taking some of those elements and teaching seniors how to use it in a real life situation to protect themselves. And
yeah,
I
I
think
didn't
that,
know that. Wow. So
yeah,
it empowers them so they don't feel helpless.
exactly. And I think there's not a lot of coverage on that in popular media. So sometimes I feel like media has a way of kind of placing certain ethnic minorities in certain boxes that kind of keeps each other at bay and against each other.
Yeah,
But there's not a lot of conversations about uh, what do you call it? Just different communities helping out with each other
yeah,
too as well. So that is something that we can also explore, is like the cross culture
yeah.
of like being like the allyship between other communities too.
Yeah, I think that's important stuff. I'm lucky because I do political cartoons. I came from,
Yes.
but then I have my fine arts and stuff, which is more personal and stuff. But I channel some of my fears into that. But it seems to me that because your stuff is very social justice oriented, a lot of your stuff and stuff, and that's why I asked that question. It just popped in my head when I asked it,
Mhm.
because it naturally bleeds into what you do and stuff. You've
Yeah.
done some in your website. You have done some protest photography and stuff. So I thought,
Mhm.
oh, it's a good question to ask. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, how can you not? So much about photography is capturing life, and so much of social justice is part of our
yeah,
livelihood. So it's I'll be doing myself as a disservice as an artist if I don't capture those moments, right, of us trying to fight for our livelihood. So yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you point that out too. I kind of miss coming out to those protests as well.
well, you can do it later and stuff. I do that
Yeah.
once in a while and stuff, but I'm nowhere near as good a photographer as you. Yeah, I'm curious though. When you talk about Asian, I struggled with my Asian American identity for a long time because I was raised in Navy bases. There used to be something
Mm.
called a banana, yellow on the outside, white on the inside. That
Yeah.
was me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so because I didn't really know that many Filipino Americans and Asian Americans until maybe junior high and high school. And I remember the Filipino Americans would always ask me, why don't you know the language? Why don't you know the culture and stuff? And it took me a while to feel comfortable both with my Asian heritage and still love being an American and stuff.
Mm.
I used to think it had to be either or and stuff, but I began to learn, it doesn't have to, I can love both and stuff. But, so yeah, I don't really consider myself a banana anymore, but I used to think of myself that way. Did
Hmm.
you go through that, or was it a
Oh yeah,
different experience with you?
big time, big time. I mean, so I didn't think of myself as a banana when I was living in East LA because a lot of my friends were Asian and
Yeah.
like Latinx. So, um, but when I moved over to the suburbs in Chicago, that's when I feel like my identity has kind of shifted more towards a Midwestern
Oh,
version of myself. So and I think it's just it's sort of my subconscious way of trying to survive is trying to fit in like some of the white folks.
yeah.
Like I learned that I sort of change the colloquial or certain slangs, kind of like the way that my mouth and my teeth and my tongue sort of form itself more as a Midwestern talk.
But would you have a drawl, I guess?
It was more, yeah, like I think I over enunciate or I become more mindful of what I say and I speak more from the diaphragm. I don't know. It's but like instead of saying soda, we say, oh, do you want to grab a pop, or
Oh, okay.
milk. It's just like all these little nuances are what makes Midwestern unique. So I start to adopt that. Even the way that I change my outfit. I used to wear a lot of back in LA. I used to kind of dress like some of the hip hop artists that I follow, like Tupac. I would wear a bandana this way,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
would
yeah.
wear big basketball jerseys and Nike shoes. But then when I moved into the suburbs in Chicago, I started to dress more towards like certain bands that I was listening to. So I was wearing more skinny jeans, Converse. I had an emo haircut to blend it in, right? Again,
You look like you came from a John Hughes movie, right?
it's pretty much, yeah, exactly, yeah. So
Yeah.
I
That's
was,
good. I used to have a crush on Molly Ringwald, so that's not
oh
bad.
yeah, of course, yeah. Molly, she was the it girl back in the 80s.
In the 80s, yeah.
Yeah, like Breakfast Club classic. But yeah,
Yeah.
so I guess at the time I my own version of banana. And then moving to the Bay Area, I don't know what kind of fruit I would consider myself.
Oh,
Um, maybe a durian. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I think I'm more of a durian. I'm more like yellow on the inside now and kind of like more tough exterior on the outside
Oh,
with
yeah.
just being more acceptable of who I am. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm sort of a wimp all over, so it doesn't matter. Yeah. I'm curious. Okay. Um, in our group art show,
Mm,
some of the work is more political and some of it's more personal. You
mhm,
straddle both. So
mm,
like some of your photo essays explore the gentrification of Chinatown, or and another essay explores how the fall of Saigon still affects the South, the Vietnamese American community of San Jose.
Yes.
But some of your other stuff is more personal, where it's like you did a photo essay series on like how your move to South Oregon affected you and your girlfriend and stuff.
Yes.
How do you straddle both the political and the personal and stuff in your work?
That's a good question. How do I separate or straddle or I guess piggyback on each other?
It doesn't have to be either or maybe and stuff, but do they
Yeah.
influence each other and stuff, or do you like for me,
Yeah.
my political cartoons, that's where I focus on my responsibilities towards the community. But my fine arts, I don't really put much politics into it because I think my fine arts I try to reserve for my responsibilities to myself
Mm,
and stuff because like you know there's a lot of terrible stuff happening, and if I focus just on politics, I don't think it's good for my mental health
yeah.
and stuff. And I'm very liberal in my politics, but I used to have conservative friends, and I noticed that as the times got more polarized, there's this constant need to be outraged by political issues that really affected my relationships with them. And I saw how bad it was and I don't want to be that outraged all the time and
Yeah.
stuff. And so I do want to have responsibility for my community. And I do want to be political, but just not all the time.
Yeah.
I want to reserve some part for the part of myself that likes to laugh,
Yeah.
that likes to, that likes to see the funny parts of life, or to see, my relationships with my family or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I try to separate it just for my mental health and
Yeah.
stuff. Is that the same with you, or is that
Yeah.
different?
That's a good point. You mentioned that now that you gave some more context to it, I was able to kind of reflect back on the way that I shoot and the way of the subject matter I choose. I know early on in Davis, or even just right after graduation, a lot of my work was predominantly on social justice, primarily as like the main motive. As
Yeah.
I gotten older, I I think there's always a sense of trying to find comfort in nostalgia, and sometimes a lot of that nostalgia comes from a memory that I have that is either buried or an inner child that needs to be um, to 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 have a conversation with again. And
Yeah.
so, going back to the Chinatown project, that was more so personal, and but just
Oh,
with some, maybe some political commentaries to it, but it's more so in the backdrop,
okay.
so to
Okay.
speak,
So
because
that's not as political. I guess that's more personal. And whatever politics just happens to be there, but it's really more personal.
it's really more personal. And a lot of my more recent work has been around that too. Even the COVID-19 um, photos with healthcare workers, or even photos of myself. Um, by the way, girlfriend then, now fiance. I don't think we ever
Oh,
caught
hey,
up.
congratulations.
Yeah,
Hey, that's good.
we
Hey,
proposed.
congratulations and
Thank
stuff.
you, like 3 weeks ago. Um,
Oh, okay, okay. Oh, that's
but
wonderful. Tell her congratulations. And you seem like a good guy.
I feel like I try to be. uh, but yeah, it as an artist, I've been more into the personal too, because as as for me to create art, the whole objective is self-preservation.
Uh,
Because who's if I'm gone, who's going to tell my story? No, I don't know. I mean, maybe my kids, but I'm not going to put that burden on them. I want them to tell their own story. So self-preservation to me is always a personal thing, and whatever political or environmental or any type of social issues that we have, that's always going to be in the backdrop, and maybe that might be a driving force, but the main theme is always the personal aspects of it. Again, they're both having a conversation with each other, but to me, my goal is to preserve myself, and if I can get um, connected with another person, if someone looks at that and they feel some type of connection to it, then I that's already a job well done to me on my part.
uh,
So yeah, preservation, personal, that's always been sort of the driving force behind the work that I do.
yeah. And as part of your documenting your family, because all of us our all of our identities are always tied up with our family and with the generations that came. That's why it's important for you as well for family, I guess.
Yes,
Okay. Yeah, I'm wondering,
absolutely.
for me, one of the things I've been doing is not in an artistic sense, but I'm trying to record interviews of my dad telling stories of his childhood, or my mother-in-law, because they're in their 70s and 80s now. If I don't preserve it now, while they still have their memories and while they're still around, it may be too late and
Yeah,
stuff. You
yeah,
know, is part of are you is part of your motivation also, is one of the things spurring you just the fact that your parents are getting older?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so one of the stories that I've been trying to work on right now is their journey into the refugee camp, and then what's their journey at the refugee camp. So from 1984 to 1986, that's the year that I'm currently working on. That's because that's the year that they try to escape multiple times, and it's a story that I've heard throughout growing up, but I've never really had the chance to document it. Just
Uh,
because I don't know, I see my parents. I never really see them passing away. It just seems that every time I'm back at home, age doesn't really factor in. Me being in
yeah.
my late 30s, it seems like I'm like 12 years old, right? Because
I'm in my 50s. It never changes and
it
stuff. It doesn't
exactly,
change. I'm in my 50s, and my dad is still trying to go eat now.
yeah, yeah. The family dynamic is there, but it's real, and it's. I guess maybe it's just me trying to escape the idea of like our mortality, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But now that I'm coming more into terms with it, and every time I see them, they do look like they're getting older, and it's been more of a recent wake up call that hey, my parents have a very rich story, and it's a
Yeah.
story that is so a huge part of my identity and how I became the person I am today. But no one's capturing this, right?
Yeah.
And and sometimes I envy that there are people who are already capturing stories about their parents. Why am I not capturing stories of my parents?
Yeah.
And even though there are similarities with me and other families, there's also nuances too. And I think it helps to normalize the diversity of our Asian American experiences, right? So
Yeah.
um, I've been recently recording our conversations with me and my mom. This was back last month around midnight.
Oh.
We were watching uh, Vietnamese karaoke on TV, and she was knitting too, and I would have the phone recorded, and we would just talk to her, experiencing like she was in prison when she tried to escape and she got caught, and some of the people that she escaped with, um, like they had to swallow a wedding ring because they were using this wedding ring as a ticket to the captain on the boat to escape because they didn't have money, but they had their
Oh. Okay.
family jewelries, right? And so when the
That
communist
never would
cops,
have occurred to me. Yeah. Wow.
yeah, I didn't know that either. But when the communists came and they arrested some of these people, that was the only thing they could think of in that time was to swallow this thing. So hopefully they can get the jury out of them.
Yeah.
But like these desperate measures that they had to go through just to escape was like disheartening, but it was also such a wonderful story in itself because I mean, how often do you hear something like that, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm currently working on that, and I'm hoping maybe one day, sponsored by Chopstick Alley, hopefully I'll have a self exhibit of
Nice. I will I will let Trammy know that you know this Vi Son Trinh guy, he should have an exhibit on his own, as an impartial person.
much a person, yeah, clearly objective, but
Just call me anonymous.
just yeah, anonymous, yeah. Anonymous cartoonist, political cartoonist slash family portrait
Yeah, yeah.
cartoonist. No clues included.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious. You're mentioning something that it just popped in my mind. Okay, now with you're saying our parents. When you look at them, you forget that they've had an adventurous life.
Yeah,
Like my I think different Asian American communities, not monolith. each American community, the older generations have their own different traumas, right? So
Yes.
for my dad and my mom went through World War II and the occupation of Japanese and stuff. But so my grandpa was in the Death March and stuff. But I didn't know that until later on and stuff. But my cousin's generation went through martial law under Marcos. You know, certain generations of Cambodian Americans went through the Khmer Rouge. You know, among Chinese Americans, either the Cultural Revolution or you know, the stifling of the pro-democracy movement in Tiananmen Square, right? For
Mhm.
Vietnamese Americans of older generation, it's the Vietnam War and stuff.
Yeah.
You, as a younger generation who never actually experienced the Vietnam War, but you feel a responsibility to preserve their memories of the Vietnam War so that, you know, okay, the kids and grandkids and the younger gen, you know, can learn about in the same way like the Holocaust survivors in World War II, they were very traumatized, and for a long time they were too traumatized to speak out about what happened in the Holocaust. But then they began to realize if I don't tell my story to my children and grandchildren, you know, we're not going to learn the lessons of the Holocaust, and it may happen again.
Hmm.
Do you feel that responsibility?
Yeah, good
Does that
question.
make
I
sense,
think,
or am I wrong? I mean, you know, does that make sense, or am I describing it bad?
yeah, no, that makes perfect sense because now I'm starting to think because Vietnamese were relatively a new Asian community in a sense that we've been here maybe post Vietnam War. There's some that came in here pre, but not so many.
Mhm.
Um, I think there's probably 3 or 4 generations of Vietnamese people now here in the States. And one of my biggest fears is if I have kids, they're not going to be able to speak Vietnamese very well because I can speak kind of conversational, but I
Yeah.
won't be able to teach them the same as someone as like my parents. So sometimes the responsibility does sort of resurfaces is am I somebody with experience of documenting stories? Do I have to preserve that, or yeah, do I have to preserve that? And so
I mean, you may not need to and stuff, but you know,
yeah,
each artist is different. You know, if you don't feel the need to, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you do feel, but you personally feel the not the need, but the what's the right word? The urge to
the
preserve
urge.
it.
Yeah, I do have the urge to preserve it. I mean, I already have the urge to preserve my parents' stories already. And
Yeah,
so hopefully that does it collaterally to
yeah,
younger generations. They might see something like that and they might get inspired by that. Because I'm glad that we're seeing more narratives of young Vietnamese Americans. But in terms of like the pop culture, there's not so many at the moment.
yeah.
And I would like to see that within our community and just also other Asian communities too as well. So um, I think a lot of my recent work has been kind of exploring that Vietnamese identity and just going through that rabbit hole to see what other nuances within that Vietnamese identity can we find out and figure out. Um, so yeah, I'm seeing a lot of like new short films from my friends who are kind of exploring their parents um,
Oh,
of their conflict in Vietnam War and that post traumatic here in the States.
yeah,
So that in itself is already inspiring generations like myself
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
maybe do the same and but create with my own personal narrative.
yeah.
So yeah, there is that sense of urge and maybe a slight responsibility too. Um, it's not to say that every time I pick up the camera that I'm like, oh, what can I do to preserve my Vietnamese community? But but yeah, but it's always a conversation because
When you have
some
that urge, you put on a special "I
it's
am
just like
responsible."
yeah, exactly. But but so much of my drive to become a creative is to explore that identity as much as the best way that I can. Um, and sometimes that the responsibility is not the initial intent, but it is there, if that makes sense.
I kind of think so. Yeah, it's kind
Yeah,
of subliminal in the background, but it's not always conscious. Is that right?
exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Yeah. I think for me, it's it's similar and stuff. I think it's because since I am sort of a banana and stuff in a sense, and I don't think I'll ever not be, just because I was raised that way and stuff. But
Yeah,
I have to, but I have learned. I love my cousins and my aunts and uncles who are a lot more knowledgeable about the culture, and they even know the language and stuff. My
yeah.
knowledge of Tagalog is embarrassing. So like, ito ang beer. This is beer. Yes. Or malaki ang ilong. I have a big nose.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah,
get
yeah,
it's hard to put that into regular conversation. So
yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah,
so
yeah.
my knowledge of Tagalog is embarrassingly bad. But I'm proud of my. But I learned that within the constraints of what I was raised, I can be both proud of my Americanness and my Filipino-ness and stuff, and also my Asian Americanness too and stuff. It's just
Yes.
I think each American age, just because of the way we're raised, we always have to redefine it in our own way and
Yeah.
stuff.
And I think there's a charm to that too, because so when I went back to Vietnam, I often feel embarrassed of my very elementary Vietnamese proficiency. And I was talking to a friend of like I feel like I can't fit in because I can only have conversation in Vietnamese, but I can't really delve into the more deeper stuff of our conversations. Like I can't talk
Yeah,
about like the intent behind my work or like my emotional wellness. Like I just can't tap into that language bank.
yeah,
And then she said something of, it's part of your what is it? Is it third world upbringing, or I forgot the term for it, but essentially whatever word that she said, but she said that it's indicative of your richness, exposure to both Vietnam and American, and oftentimes maybe you, because you can't converse in Vietnamese fluently, uh, it's a charm to it because it's language in itself, kind of paints you holistically of who you are. So I guess to give you a more better example, when I speak to my parents, I speak in broken Viet, right?
um,
But that's sort of a reflection of who I am. I'm a little bit of both, like a banana, like you said.
yeah,
I, I speak Viet, I speak English, and the words itself, the context, the syntax, they fit together in a way that only is unique to me. And I guess that's my way of affirming myself that I'm fine with my Vietnamese proficiency because I'm unique. but but there is some truth to that too as well, and I think it's very empowering to be okay that the efficiency is not always there, but you're still able to kind of communicate like who you
uh,
are through the choices of words that you can or you're able to. So
that's cool.
yeah,
That's cool. Yeah.
yeah.
So okay. Well, we got 5 minutes left, so let me
Mm.
ask you the last question and stuff. What do you love about being a photographer, and why is a gallery like Chopsticks Alley Art Gallery important?
Okay. What do I love about being a photographer? Um, it's fun. First of all, if nothing is fun, I wouldn't do it. But it's just fun, like the sensuality of picking up a film photography,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
like the process of it. The just tactile. For me, I'm a very tactile person, so it's fun. The subject matter that I get to choose to shoot, the interaction with the people, and then the community that develops from that too, and the discourse that we have about the work that we're portraying and presenting. To
Yeah.
me, that's why I do it too, and also that self exploration and the self preservation that we spoke about a little bit, too as well. So that's more of like the long term investment of being a photographer too. Um, and then why is Chopstick Alley is important? It's important because, oh my gosh, there are so many amazing local creatives in the
Yeah.
San Jose area that
Yeah.
doesn't get the limelight, right? Whether it's through finance, whether it's just through opportunities, whatever. But to have something like this right in our own neighborhood, that that tells like how rich San Jose, um, community creatives are, with different backgrounds and upbringings and stories. And so like I'm thankful to be reached out by Trami and her team
Oh,
to
yeah.
be a part of this, and then meeting you and then other creatives too as well.
Yeah.
So that is why it's so necessary to have this type of community.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. We still have 4 minutes left. I'm
Oh,
curious. Yeah, no, that's good. But I want to thank you. But I'm curious, when you went to Vietnam, when I went to the Philippines in
yes.
1993 and stuff, everybody kept calling me the American and stuff. And I asked my aunt, how do they know I'm American when I don't open my mouth? They said, you smell like an American and stuff. And I never knew what that meant. When you went to Vietnam, did they instantly know you were American? And was it,
Oh,
yeah. Was it because, you had a particular American smell or?
I was getting bitten by mosquitoes a lot.
Oh, yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know
yeah.
if
Me too. Did you
so
sleep under the mosquito nets?
I did sleep in one of those mosquito nets, but like when I wasn't sleeping on the mosquito nets, I was getting bitten quite a bit. I don't know if it's the American blood. It's like, oh, look at this like virgin blood that's never been bitten. Like, let's tap into that.
Yeah,
So
I was curious because I kept wondering, what does an American smell like? Is it the soap or?
do we just sweat more, or like
Yeah,
we're like intolerant to the heat?
yeah.
Yeah,
All of that diet of McDonald's makes it smell a certain way.
yeah, like yeah, I did get those remarks quite a bit. It was the way that I dress. It was the way that I walk. I think certain Vietnamese people have a certain sway in their gait.
Oh, I
They
didn't know
walk
that. Okay.
they walk much more faster,
Oh,
depending on where you live. But then in the village, they walk much more slower. I'm kind of like somewhere in between, because I live in the suburbs.
yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
what else? Yeah, just the way I care. Obviously the language, the moment I open up my mouth, they know that I'm not around from here. But I have freckles too. People, like some of my family members, didn't know what freckles are in the skin. They thought it was a disease.
Oh,
I was like, no, I'm just very sensitive to the sun.
yeah,
uh
yeah. Okay.
so like my phenotype here and there. But yeah, it's they can definitely see me from a miles away that I'm not Vietnamese native. But
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, don't worry. This is a very stupid question of mine.
No, it's a funny question too, because I often think about that too. Like, oh, if I'm going back to home to Vietnam, what other questions am I